There was a time when breakfast began with a sound. Not the vibration of a phone pulled from sleep, not the glow of a screen warming up before your eyes had fully opened, but something heavier, something physical, something unmistakably real. The pull of a freezer door, stiff with cold resistance, requiring a small effort to open. The scrape of metal against ice, sharp and unmistakable, echoing slightly in a quiet kitchen. The soft, hollow thud of a small can landing on a kitchen counter that still carried the chill of night. It was a sound that meant the day had begun, before food promised productivity, clarity, energy, or optimization, before packaging tried to tell us who we were or who we should become, before speed became the highest virtue of everyday life. There was a frozen cylinder waiting patiently in the back of the freezer. A can of frozen orange juice concentrate. It didn't look fresh. It didn't claim to be organic, artisanal, or premium. It didn't sell a lifestyle, an aspiration, or a version of yourself you were meant to become. It didn't need to. It simply existed, wrapped in cardboard, rimmed with metal, edges dusted with ice crystals that clung stubbornly to its surface, no matter how many times it was shifted to make room for something else. For decades, those cans lived quietly in kitchens across America. Minute Maid, Old Orchard, Treetop, names spoken casually, without emphasis, without explanation. They were never exciting, and they were never meant to be. They were dependable. They belonged to routines that repeated themselves, day after day, year after year. Routines built around shared tables, predictable mornings, and a pace of life that allowed for small rituals without apology or justification. They were part of the background of childhood, part of the architecture of family life, something you didn't notice until it was gone. Now, as 2026 approaches, those cans are disappearing, not with announcements, not with farewell commercials, not with a final marketing push designed to manufacture nostalgia, but quietly, freezer by freezer, shelf by shelf, store by store, and as they disappear, something else goes with them, something harder to name, something harder to replace. This is the story of how frozen juice concentrate became a staple, why it mattered more than we realized while it was still there, and why its quiet disappearance feels like the end of an era we didn't know we were living in. Part 1. Frozen juice concentrate was never meant to be comforting. It was meant to be practical. Its origins trace back to World War II, when supplying fresh fruit juice to soldiers stationed overseas presented an enormous logistical challenge. Fresh juice spoiled quickly. It was heavy. It took up precious cargo space that could be used for medical supplies, equipment, or food that could survive long transport. Vitamin C was essential, but oranges were fragile. Juice was unreliable. Shipping fresh produce across oceans through heat and delay was often impossible. The military needed something lighter, more stable, and more reliable, a way to deliver essential nutrients without waste. Food scientists turned to concentration. By removing most of the water from juice and freezing what remained, they created a product that could travel long distances, survive extended storage, and still be reconstituted into something familiar on the other end. This wasn't innovation for pleasure. It was innovation born from necessity. Efficiency mattered more than flavor. Function mattered more than feeling. When Minute Maid was introduced nationally in the 1940s, it wasn't advertised as indulgent or luxurious. It wasn't framed as a treat or a comfort food. It was framed as intelligent, modern, efficient, reliable. One can. Add water. Stir. That was the promise. And after the war, as home freezers became more common in the 1950s and 1960s, frozen juice concentrate transitioned seamlessly from military solution to household staple. It fit perfectly into the post-war vision of American domestic life. Suburban homes with new appliances, structured schedules built around work and school, families eating together at predictable times. Orange juice became more than a drink. It became a marker. Morning had officially begun. The day was in motion. Routine had been restored. Part 2. By the 1970s and 1980s, frozen juice concentrate had become invisible. Not forgotten, not ignored, just expected. It was always there. Behind frozen peas and corn, beside ice cube trays and loaves of bread wrapped in plastic, sometimes stacked 2 or 3 cans deep, quietly waiting for its turn. The cardboard label stiff with frost. The metal rim cold enough to sting your fingers if you grabbed it too quickly. Children learned the process early, often before they understood why it mattered. Peel off the cardboard sleeve. Punch the lid with the back of a spoon, careful not to spill the frozen shards. Slide the frozen cylinder into a plastic pitcher with a dull, satisfying clunk. Then came the part that defined the ritual. Fill the empty can with water. Once, twice, not guessing, not approximating. Using the can itself as the measure. Pour slowly, watching the ice resist, then slowly surrender. Stir deliberately, not rushing. Watching the colors spread and deepen as the frozen core softened and disappeared. It took effort. Not much, but enough. Enough to slow you down. Enough to make you present. You didn't drink frozen concentrate absent-mindedly. You helped make it. And in that small act, something subtle but important happened. Food wasn't just consumed. It was prepared. You learned that things didn't always arrive finished. That participation mattered. That patience produced something better. Minute Maid didn't need constant reinvention or trend-driven redesigns. It didn't need to follow fashion. It already belonged. It was part of the structure of the morning, as familiar as cereal bowls, toast crumbs, the hum of a refrigerator, and the faint sound of a clock ticking somewhere nearby. Part 3. The change didn't arrive all at once. It arrived quietly, almost politely. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, refrigerated juices labeled not from concentrate began to dominate grocery store shelves. They promised freshness. They promised purity. They promised effort-free living. No mixing, no measuring, no waiting. Twist the cap, pour, move on. At first, frozen concentrate survived alongside these new options. It was cheaper. It lasted longer. It made no claims beyond what it was. But daily habits were shifting. Mornings grew shorter. Families ate together less often. Breakfast became something you grabbed instead of something you prepared. The freezer, once a place of preparation, became storage. And the small ritual of mixing juice began to feel unnecessary. Not wrong, not outdated, just slow. As life accelerated, patience became less available. Food began to prioritize immediacy over involvement. Frozen concentrate asked for participation in a world increasingly uncomfortable with pauses. Part 4. By the early 2000s, the frozen juice aisle had begun to shrink. Still present, but diminished. Fewer brands, fewer flavors, less shelf space. Minute Maid remained largely because of familiarity and loyalty, not because demand was growing. Younger generations didn't grow up watching juice being made. They grew up watching bottles being opened. They didn't associate orange juice with preparation. They associated it with convenience. Frozen concentrate required stopping, measuring, stirring. Modern food culture had little patience for those moments. By the early 2020s, many grocery stores quietly stopped carrying frozen concentrate altogether. Some regions lost it completely. Others carried one or two options, tucked into corners of freezer aisles, easy to overlook, easy to forget. There were no announcements, no explanations, just absence. Part 5. What makes the disappearance of frozen juice concentrate feel heavier than it should isn't the juice itself, it's what it represented. It belonged to a time when effort wasn't seen as inefficiency, when kitchens weren't just spaces you passed through, when routines offered comfort instead of friction. The can didn't try to look fresh. It didn't claim to be premium. It didn't chase trends. It waited. And in a world increasingly defined by speed, waiting became its greatest flaw. Frozen juice concentrate didn't fail. The world simply moved past the kind of time it assumed still existed. The end of frozen juice concentrate won't be dramatic. There will be no farewell advertisement, no final campaign, no announcement marking the moment. One day, someone will open a freezer and notice the empty space where it used to be. And for a moment, they'll remember the weight of the can, the cold metal against their palm, the smell of citrus mixing with water, the patience it required, the quiet satisfaction of having made something, even something small. We didn't think of it as nostalgia then. It was just life. But now, as 2026 approaches and those cans quietly disappear, it becomes clear they carried more than juice. They carried routine. They carried care. They carried a slower version of everyday life. And once they're gone, that version goes with them. Not erased, not forgotten, just finished.